How could things get any worse for Iran right now? Its new supreme leader has just stepped onto the stage, and instead of looking for a way out, he has chosen escalation. More threats, more ultimatums, more fantasies about closing the world's most important oil choke point and scaring the United States into backing down. But here is the problem for Tehran. This is not 1979, and this is not a region the US military forgot how to dominate. Mojtaba Khamenei has just issued his first public message since taking power, and if his words become policy, he may have just accelerated the next phase of Iran's disaster. In the first remarks attributed to him as supreme leader, Reuters reported that Mojtaba Khamenei said the Strait of Hormuz should remain closed as a tool of pressure, and that all US bases in the region should be closed because they would be attacked. AP's reporting filled in the broader message. He declared, "These countries must clarify their position regarding those who have attacked our beloved homeland and killed members of our people. I recommend that they shut down those bases as soon as possible, because by now they must have realized that the United States' claims of providing security and peace have been nothing more than a lie." He also said, "The lever of closing the Strait of Hormuz must certainly continue to be used as well. Studies have also been conducted on opening other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and would be highly vulnerable. Their activation will take place if the wartime situation continues and in accordance with considerations of expediency." And on Iran's internal situation, he praised fighters who had dispelled their illusion of being able to dominate our beloved country or possibly divide it. That is not a peace offer. That is not de-escalation. That is a threat matrix. First, pressure the Gulf. Then, threaten US bases. Then, talk about other fronts. Then, insist Iran is not breaking internally. And that last part may be the most revealing of all. Leaders do not usually boast that they have prevented division, unless division is exactly what they fear. That is the tell. That is the stress fracture showing through the paint. But wait, it gets worse for Tehran. Because these threats are landing in a battle space where the United States and its allies already hold the big advantage that matters most: air and maritime dominance. Reuters reporting on the new leader's message sits inside a wider war picture in which Iran's strategy is increasingly about economic disruption and symbolic retaliation, not battlefield control. AP reported that oil had surged back above $100 a barrel as Iran and its partners kept pounding shipping and Gulf infrastructure. But that same reporting also noted that US and Israeli strikes had already imposed a heavy toll on Iran's leadership, military, and ballistic missile program. In other words, Iran is trying to weaponize chaos because it is losing the direct contest. And this is where Mojtaba Khamenei may have absolutely no idea what is coming. Because threatening US bases is one thing, actually suppressing American carrier strike groups, long-range bombers, tanker support, electronic warfare, and layered missile defense is another universe entirely. A base is not just a patch of desert and a runway. In a US-led campaign, a base is a node in a giant combat web. Knock at one node, and the response comes from carriers, destroyers, submarines, bombers, and aircraft operating from multiple directions. The entire American system is designed to keep fighting while moving. Tehran keeps talking like it is facing fixed targets. It is not. It is facing a machine built for rotation, redundancy, and relentless tempo. And yes, that means Hormuz too. Khamenei says the Strait of Hormuz must remain closed. The problem is that declaring a waterway closed is easier than actually holding it shut against a navy built around escorts, mine countermeasures, airborne surveillance, strike aircraft, and layered maritime security. Iran can harass, mine, drone, sabotage, and spike insurance costs. It can absolutely make the region bleed. But keeping Hormuz sealed for long against a determined US-backed maritime effort is a much taller order. It is a contest of endurance, protection, and industrial scale. Iran's leverage is real. Its ability to convert that leverage into permanent control is another matter. This is the moment where rhetoric collides with geography. Iran sits on the Gulf. The United States sits on the oceans. Tehran thinks in terms of punishment. Washington thinks in terms of access. Iran wants to threaten shipping, bases, and regional governments until the political will cracks. The American answer, historically, is brutally simple. Reopen the lanes, harden the bases, expand the target list, and keep the pressure on until the other side runs out of launchers, fuel, or nerves. That does not mean the costs are small. It means the strategic playbook is familiar. And that brings us to the line about opening other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and would be highly vulnerable. That sounds dramatic. It is supposed to. It is meant to create uncertainty in every embassy, every tanker office, every regional capital, every intelligence briefing room. But the more Iran spreads outward, the more it exposes the weakness at the center. Proxy escalation can create fear. It can create headlines. It can burn money and time. But it also invites a broader coalition response, and it forces already stressed Iranian command networks to synchronize more actors across more territory under more surveillance. For a regime already under air attack and economic strain, that is not always leverage. Sometimes it is overextension wearing a revolutionary slogan. And while Mojtaba Khamenei was issuing threats today, the Ukraine war kept delivering a very different lesson about modern conflict. On March 12th, Reuters reported that Ukrainian drones struck the Tikhoretsk oil hub in Russia's Krasnodar region, a key supply route for petroleum products to the Black Sea port of Novorossiysk, with a large-scale fire breaking out after the strike. Reuters also reported on March 12th that Ukraine and Romania signed a statement of intent to produce Ukrainian defense systems, including drones, in Romania. And just 2 days earlier, Zelensky said Ukraine had sent air defense teams to Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia to help counter Iranian aerial attacks. That is the real story of modern war right now. The side that adapts fastest, with drones, networks, and industrial partnerships, starts rewriting the battlefield. There is another point here, and it should make Moscow and Tehran very uncomfortable. Oryx's visually confirmed tally now lists Russia at 24,197 equipment losses overall, including 4,350 tanks and 13,913 armoured combat vehicles. Those numbers are conservative by design, because Oryx only counts losses backed by photo or video evidence. That is what attrition looks like when a state keeps trying to intimidate reality into submission. Metal burns, stockpiles shrink, crews vanish. The myth of invulnerability dies one hull at a time. And the last 72 hours in Ukraine have added fresh reminders of how ugly this gets when wars become wars of punishment. Reuters reported on March 10th that a Russian strike on Slovyansk killed 4 people and injured 16. Reuters also reported that Ukraine said it struck a key missile component facility in Bryansk with Storm Shadow missiles, while Moscow said civilians were killed in the same attack. Meanwhile, NATO said on March 11th that senior officials from Ukraine's State Emergency Service visited NATO headquarters to brief allies on resilience, crisis management, critical infrastructure protection, and future cooperation. That is a striking contrast. Russia and Ukraine are still trading blows, but Ukraine is also exporting lessons, building partnerships, and embedding itself deeper inside the Euro-Atlantic security system. So while Khamenei rants, Putin's meat grinder keeps getting worse, and that is the mirror Iran should be staring into. A hardline leadership can always promise endurance. It can always talk about sacrifice, revenge, and national unity. But prolonged war is not a slogan contest. It is a logistics contest. It is a maintenance contest. It is an air defense contest. It is a production contest. It is a morale contest. And the regimes that talk the biggest often discover, very late, that speeches do not intercept cruise missiles, do not reopen ports, do not repair refineries, and do not calm frightened elites. This is where the bluff gets expensive. Mojtaba Khamenei is signaling that he prefers a longer war if that is what it takes. But longer war does not just mean more pressure on the enemy. It means more pressure on his own regime, more displaced civilians, more disruption, more economic strangulation, more isolation for Gulf states that now have every reason to double down on outside protection rather than gamble on Iranian goodwill. AP noted that Khamenei is widely seen as even less compromising than his father and is close to the Revolutionary Guard. That may help him consolidate the hardliners. It may also narrow his options to the point where every off-ramp starts looking like ideological surrender. Enter the American response. If Iran or its aligned forces intensify against US bases, the likely answer is not retreat. It is thicker missile defense, more escorts, more ISR, more pressure on launch networks, and more attacks on the systems enabling escalation. If Tehran tries to turn Hormuz into a permanent hostage crisis, the US answer is likely to be a campaign to force the waterway open while degrading every platform used to keep it shut. If Iran lights up new fronts, it risks inviting the exact thing it says it wants to prevent: a broader, more integrated coalition effort against it. That is the trap. The more dramatic the threat, the easier it becomes for Washington to justify a bigger response. And inside Iran, every new week of war raises the same poisonous question: who actually benefits from this? The citizens sheltering under bombardment, the traders watching routes choke, the officials trying to keep services running, or the ideological core that measures success in defiance even when the country around it is being battered. Khamenei's speech tried to project control, but projecting control and possessing control are not the same thing. A regime can sound fierce on television and still be hollowing out underneath. That is how fractures spread, quietly at first, then all at once. So what happens next? Expect Iran to keep testing the edges. Expect more pressure on shipping, more threats against regional states, more attempts to create fear through uncertainty, sabotage, and proxy action. Expect the US and its partners to focus on keeping lanes open, shielding infrastructure, and punishing anything that looks like a credible move toward a wider regional front. And expect every day of this war to become a referendum on whether hardline escalation can survive contact with Western air power, allied coordination, and the cruel arithmetic of sustained attrition. Because that is the big thing here. Mojtaba Khamenei just threatened the United States. He threatened Gulf states. He threatened the global economy. He hinted at new fronts. He framed survival as revenge. But if he really believes America will surrender its bases, let Hormuz stay shut, and watch a spreading regional war without massively escalating the answer, then he is gambling on a fantasy. And fantasy is a terrible substitute for strategy. Putin is still learning that in Ukraine. Iran may be about to learn it in the Gulf. The question now is not whether Tehran can still cause pain. It can. The question is whether its new leader understands the scale of the storm he is inviting. Because once a regime starts threatening everyone at once, it sometimes discovers the final blow is not one airstrike, one naval clash, or one speech. It is the moment its enemies stay organized. The sea lanes reopen, the pressure keeps building, and the myth of control simply runs out.